God be with you till we meet again. By his counsel's God uphold you. With his sheep secure fold you. God be with you till we meet again.
When we first got there, I was so excited to see everybody full character.
I think my initial thoughts were, it seemed like it took a long time to get going, and we spent a lot of time just kind of standing around. But I think the pioneers did that too. I think that, I think it really, when you think about the companies, you had, in some cases, 1,300 people. I think they spent a lot of time standing around waiting to go somewhere.
I was really impressed, like everyone was totally into it, and everyone had, bonnets and earrings and everything.
Welcome, brothers and sisters. How's everybody doing? Good. You guys look absolutely fantastic.
So do you, Jimmy.
Thank you. It took a long time to get me looking like this, I'll tell you. And a number of laughs, actually, from my wife. And from other people. Did anybody else stop anywhere along the way today? Yeah. All right, how many people got odd looks? All right. And odder than usual. I mean, I'm used to odd looks, but it was odder than usual. Well, brothers and sisters, I am truly grateful for the sacrifice that you have made to be here today. I know that some of you have come from far and wide. Who traveled the farthest, do we know? Canada? Oh, absolutely, Canada. Texas? Yeah, that's pretty far. Africa? Peter, thank you for coming. It is wonderful to have you.
As you look around, you notice we have mas and pas, and we have, youth of the ages, but we're missing babies. And babies were a big part of the trek. And they were also a big part of our Savior's ministry here.
You guys take these journals and use them. Write in them. We're supposed to be writing journals anyways. I really want you to write your testimony every day at what you're feeling. You will be amazed when you get home and look back at what you've read. And these journals are going to be with you the rest of your life.
Ye saints who dwell in Europe's shore, prepare yourselves with many more to leave your own dear native For sure God's judgments are at hand. We must cross.
It felt very real because there was an excitement there. People were asking what's going on with, are you ready for this? Are you prepared? What do you think is going to happen? So that was the unknown was an exciting element and a little bit scary. I was nervous, but I was excited.
The family I was assigned to was Mom, Paul, Woodruff. They were from the New Brunswick state. It was really cool to get to know them. They were cool people. And there was a couple people in my family who were also from New Brunswick. And we got along pretty well, so good.
To see the old and feeble dame, thus lend a hand to pull the same. Maidens fair will dance and sing, young men more happy than a king, and children too will laugh and play, their strength increasing day by day. And long before the valley's gained, we will be met upon the plains with music sweet and friends so dear, and fresh supplies our hearts to cheer. And then with music and with song, how cheerfully we'll march along, and thank the day we made a start to
Watching the kids pushing the hand cart, sort of the initial experience was, oh, this is fun, and after an hour or two maybe it wasn't quite as much fun.
It was kind of weird carrying around like a baby doll, but in another light, it was really realistic to what they had to go through. So,
I was thinking before the trek, I thought the hiking might be kind of difficult, but it turned out that it wasn't too bad. I mean, I was a little sore, but not really. I didn't really think much was difficult actually on the trek.
Anytime there was breaks, anytime on the trek was kind of a nice time just to kind of sit and relax and talk to people, and you kind of could say, okay, we don't have to do anything for a while. The watermelon was great. The stories were great and kind of helped us to remind us of the whole experience, why we were there and why it was important.
purchased land from the government in Caldwell County and built homes there with my father and my brothers, Moses and George. Soon after, Lindburn W. Boggs, government of Missouri, issued an extermination order to all Mormons. We didn't see Governor Boggs too much, but we saw General Lucas. He was Governor Boggs' henchman. He carried out the orders with pleasure. There were some horrific sights there. I encountered General Lucas once, and I didn't like it. He did terrible things to the saints, to the women, children, the cattle, and he burned homes. He burned cornfields. We had to leave under the worst conditions. Our wagons had no covers. We had little food, not enough clothing to keep us warm. And as we left that area, you could see the mob on their horses watching us go by, heckling on us, saying all sorts of very bad things.
Yay! A breeze!
Hey! Hello, Mr. Camera. Could you help us push?
So the walking was pure torture for the first couple of days. Like the first hour we were doing fine, then after a couple more hours it was like, when are we going to stop? By the end of the day we were just ready to stop, fall over, sleep. But we had to do things like start a fire, eat dinner, a couple other things like journaling, and of course the standard activity and family home evening and all that. So it was a very long day.
Dancing was fun because it totally made you forget about your worries about what you were doing. It just let you have some time to have fun, and even though you were tired from that day, it really turned your mind away.
First night there was shooting stars, which I stayed up and watched, and there was a ton of them. It was like the biggest meteor shower I've ever seen, and there was I didn't sleep the first night. I maybe got like 5 minutes of sleep.
Some must pull as we go marching up the hill. So merrily on our way we go till we reach the valley. Oh! Pioneers to the west, their courage strong. They met their hats, they touched their hats, that's all they want. And as they pushed, they sang the song. Where some must push some must pull as we go marching up the hill. So merrily on our way we go until we reach the valley. Oh!
As we started our journey west, a few miles in, I needed to get something out of the cart, and I was putting my leg out, getting out of the cart, and I fell. And I was crushed by the wagon. I broke 3 ribs in my leg, and I could not move. After I was put in my covered wagon with the oxen pulling, pretty painful, but I made it. A few more miles. My daughter of 13 years old had to do my chores. She had to take care of our other 3 children, as my husband was busy with other things. He sees that we're pulling out, and he comes and he gives me a blessing. He blesses me that we will make it to Utah. I will be healthy and in good condition. Well, I just couldn't go on. I was still in so much pain with my broken leg and my ribs. I just said, there's no way, I don't have the strength to carry on. And he came back and reassured me, and he made a bed, cut the post off his bed in the legs, and he tied it up in his covered wagon. And it was like a suspension, so I was able to rock all the way west. And through this journey, going west, I gained a lot of courage and strength. My testimony grew, not only from my Heavenly Father, but from our prophet Brigham Young. So I want you guys to realize that we're pretty cool pioneers this week. We can do it. We can trek on. We are pulling hand carts. We don't have major injuries, but we have the gospel and we have strength to carry on. Your testimonies will grow so strong this week that you will have these memories for the rest of your life. Like, I wish that I was in your shoes right now and I was a youth having this experience. And I will encourage my children to have the same experience. And I hope that you guys go home and make sure you guys are documenting these things, these memories that you're having in your journals, because you'll have it forever. I just wanted to leave you this, and I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. A particular area where we were hopeful that there would be a water crossing, there literally was maybe about a foot or 2, maybe 3 feet of wet mud where we'd hoped there'd be a water crossing. So we were quite disappointed. And several know the story that the day that we got to that area, Brother Thurlow went ahead and scouted out. We were just considering different options where we could go. He came back and told me that we couldn't go where there was a little bit of water because now there was a whole lot of water and it was unpassable. I inquired if he was able to get his ATV through it, and he said yes, he was. And I said, that sounds perfect. Knowing that if you could get an ATV through it, we could get to you through it. And it was perfect. It was exactly what I had hoped. And I know that our prayers were answered. And Heavenly Father allowed an anxious beaver to build a dam, and it gave us an excellent water crossing.
How are they going to get the carts over there?
The stream crossing, I think, went pretty well. Put my shoes on the hand cart, and I just went from there. I didn't have any troubles. So.
I believe that they did some great pondering, and I felt many of them truly, really did feel at Trek exactly what some of their ancestors, they really thought about it.
The river crossing, I guess it was alright, to a point where it kind of cooled us off, but it's kind of hard because there was a lot of stuff at the bottom that we had to roll over with our carts. guy.
We're not gonna be able to get up on that.
There we are.
The other guy's dead. Oh.
Other guy.
It was higher than I thought. It was up my thighs, and it was hard getting the wagon across.
Oh my God! That's so gross! Get out of here! Get out of here! Go! That is gross! That is gross! It's a bloodsucker! Lucky me! That's the beaver. I don't want to go in. Come on, Raybone! This is the Vale Crossing.
It's like Missouri because
It's not the fish. It's about the same. You'll be fine. If I were a shorty. Keep going!
We had a young girl in our group. She was 13, Ashley, and she talked Micah Howitt into carrying her across the stream, and he actually cut his foot partway across, and pretty good. I mean, it was bleeding pretty profusely by the time he got to the other side, but he didn't drop her. He kept her out of the water, took her all the way across, and got her on the other side safely, and then we got him cleaned up, and so I was really impressed by that, you know, and I think that was probably fairly, you know, that was kind of, you think about what some of the young men did in the rescue parties and that kind of thing for those that they were with.
I was supposed to come over on the
Really experience.
Said they brought Siobhan over.
Well, he wanted to bring pictures in. They crisscross right under my chin. Okay.
Encouraged me when I see all of our youth of today who without their modern conveniences, and the structure of the trek is such that there was a lot of spiritual part of it as well as the physical aspect of it, and to see them bear these burdens of these different situations that they were placed in without a lot of murmuring, it gave me great hope for the rising generation of youth that we have, and makes you think that, you know, our prophets have told us that our youth of today have been reserved for a special time to come forth. And it strengthened my testimony to know of the truth, the fullness of what the prophets have been foreseeing.
Very good. Very good. Okay, go on the track. Very careful.
Just like seeing all the youth, like how well they work together and stuff, just it really strengthened my testimony about just we see this world and it's like see everything, and going there just really like uplifted you. It was great, and the reason I wanted to go was because like to honor them for what they did, like in my own little way.
Yeah, we were walking through a little stream, but they did it in the middle of the winter time with you know, leather straps around their feet for shoes, and it's really a testimony building experience that way.
Hello.
Especially when there was that moment of silence when the stake pregnancy asked us just to push the hand carts. I try to put myself in a place where crossing the plains, it must have been so hard for them. But I got a glimpse a little bit about how their struggles was their most greatest gift, and that gave them most spiritual strength. I really could not experience that any other way.
You're sort of walking along, and you feel you know, you want to talk to your family and get to know the kids a little bit better. You sort of feel like you ought to be doing that, and so you're not as focused on what does this mean. You're just kind of enjoying the experience. And the silent walk sort of gave you a chance to start to really focus and think about, why am I really here? And what does this really mean? And what am I expecting to gain from this?
Excelsior, 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 excelsior. All my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, excelsior.
I thought a lot of the activities were very authentic. You know, the pioneers had to unwind as well, you know. They had all this kind of pent-up energy, I suppose, and I think sometimes they just wanted to sit down and sleep under a tree, which we did that too, you know. It was a breath break, and everybody plopped on the ground and took a break.
Get it down to? There we go.
Our meal is faring rather horribly.
More?
Yeah.
Right.
Bring that on to you.
Oh, how's it coming, you?
Awesome. We did a great job because we're, you know, amazing. But never.
Dutch oven, it wasn't as hot. Had pepper and there's onions.
So far, I think you got your second place.
Here, you guys.
We're ravenous. We're ravenous.
I can't tell you exactly how long. So sleep in, enjoy yourself, and then we'll get going.
Things that President Hyde said when we stopped was really sort of telling to me. He asked, you know, did you recognize anybody in the group? And reminded us that many of the mobs that persecuted the saints were full of former saints. They were people that had left the church.
had a son, part of the mob, and lovable son, nothing mob-like about him at all. And I knew that they were coming, and yet when they did come, and it was really, it hurt in a way. The Spirit kind of testified to me that this is real, this has happened. And our mob was fairly friendly. They were saying things like, "We don't want you here, go away." And I imagine and know from history that the actual mob was much worse and much more violent. Yet hearing those simple words, "Go away, we don't want you here," really pierced my heart. And I realized this was a people who were not wanted and who were driven and driven again and driven again. And finally, they were able to go home to the place where the Lord had prepared for him.
We went into a big clearing, and it was at that point that they sort of got all the men and said, "Okay, we're now going to separate, and the women are going to do a women's pool, and we're going to go do some reconnoitering and see what happened with the mob and that kind of thing." And that was hard. It was hard to leave the girls and the women and see them do their pull. And they had us kind of go off in the woods, and we could watch a little bit, what they were doing and see them pulling. And that was kind of hard to be there and not be able to participate in that.
One girl whose doctor actually recommended that she did not go on this Pioneer Trek, that her knees were not very good, and she was taking ibuprofen most of the days to ease the pain, and we had two other girls that were had a lot of willpower, but they weren't very big girls, so I was a little nervous that it might be kind of tough for everybody, but I think they have a lot of determination, and they're not girls that things like this is going to get them down. They and I think it was a little difficult at times for them, but they surely showed courage and willpower.
I believe that they did some great pondering, and I felt many of them truly really did feel at Trek exactly what some of their ancestors, they really thought about it.
How hard it was when the men went away and it was just the woman pulling the hand carts, and it just made you have to turn to the Lord to really help you, because it was just hill after hill, and there were so many times where you didn't know if that hill, the next hill, you were going to trip, you were going to fall, or you were just going to break down. It was really hard, but it was fun.
We did not know how far we were going to go, and so that's part of the challenge is pushing through that, and the girls could really appreciate the boys and all the work they had done thus far in for the few days that the boys had pulled. They were kind of wishing the boys were there to help out. So, but they did feel a huge sense of accomplishment at the end.
It was good. I was really mad that the guys were watching us, so that wasn't fair. Yeah, I think it was good, but at the end when we saw the men waiting for us, it was kind of spiritual too.
I felt kind of creepy.
We were in the woods
yeah.
spying on them. We weren't aware of that.
I don't know. I think they did a good job. I would have loved to jump up and help, but they all seemed happy.
They weren't struggling.
Yeah, they were all singing too.
It wasn't really that hard. I think it was more of a psychological thing, oh, now we're doing it by ourselves, so it's hard. But in reality, like physically, it wasn't very hard.
Boys are back! Yay!
My name is Harriet Amelia Decker Little Hanks. I was born in 1826 and married Edwin Sabitsky Little when I was 16 years old. He was the nephew of the prophet, or the president of the church at the time, Brigham Young. And because he was really close with Brigham Young, when the saints were expelled and had to leave Nauvoo very quickly, Brigham asked his nephew, Edwin, my husband, if he would be willing to help drive the wagon trains across the ice. That was February, and he did. The last wagon that went across the ice fell through the ice. My husband helped to get the people out and get the wagons out. In doing that, he caught a violent cold and became very sick. We moved on. We spent the winter at winter quarters. My mother she was married to Brigham Young's brother and went out with Brigham Young in the first company. She was one of the first 3 women to cross the plains and land in the Salt Lake Valley. She went ahead and traveled with them, and I stayed in winter quarters. Weather was so bad that they had to hook up 5 or 6 wagon teams or oxen teams to pull one wagon a mile. Then they'd go back and pick up the next one. And doing that, we'd travel maybe a few miles in a day. After doing this for about a week, we were about 50 miles outside of Nauvoo when my husband died from the effects of rescuing the wagons that had fell through the ice. I was devastated. I was 20 years old. I had a baby boy. My mother was gone, or she was going to leave, and I was left to cross the plains by myself. And I had been cared for by my husband the whole time, and I just was a young mother looking at the huge task of crossing the plains on my own. But I did it. I did it. When we reached Immigration Canyon, we had stopped for lunch, and I'd never heard of a cloudburst before. But then I heard this thundering and rolling. And I looked up, and as soon as quicker than I could even describe it, the water was upon me. It was up to my waist. I grabbed my young baby, and I put him on a tree stump to hold on. And I held on and held him as much as I could. And just when I thought that I was going to be washed away, a man came away, and he picked me up and he took me back to my wagon. By now the water was up to the wagon box. But thank goodness for those mill irons. They made it so that the wagon didn't overtake, and we were put up into safety. I traveled on, and we made it without much incident into the Salt Lake Valley. But one thing I'd learned from that I have been taught is that the Lord blesses the women. He cares about the women, and He cares about the sisters of this church, and He blesses them. And I want everyone to always recognize that and know that they are of value, and He loves them. Once we got to the Salt Lake Valley, I made my way by working to prepare meals and care for people that came in. After about a month, I was working and serving meals for some of the Mormon battalion, and a man came there, and I met him, and his name was Ephraim Hanks. We courted, and not long after that, we were married, and we had many children after that together.
Yeah, dude, I did it right.
Yeah, we went through some mud, and it was, you know, It was a great experience because there was no mud on the trail a few days before, and it did rain before we started the trek, and there was several opportunities for the youth to go through mud and to have to deal with that challenge.
They were trying to stay a little bit dry, and the guys with the handcart were trying to pull it on the sides. It was pretty interesting. They got fairly creative trying to stay out of the mud.
It was nice to watch, their enthusiasm, and there really wasn't any complaining about having to pull through the mud. And they kind of accepted that challenge and took it head on and got through it.
I think it was a unique opportunity to be able to help organize the games. Gary and I obviously prayed about it and thought about it, and we wanted to incorporate activities where they'd have to work together as a family to reinforce that bond. And actually those were the most favorite activities, where they had to work together.
We had the classic tug of war, and we had a bucket brigade with water, and we also had the skeleton walk. And you saw a lot of the families at the beginning. They weren't reluctant, but they were tired from pulling all day, and it almost felt like at the beginning maybe it was a little bit of forced fun, but just a few minutes into it you could see that the families were really enjoying it and the opportunity to work together and to bond with each other. The individual activities we kind of separated. We had candle making, letter writing, and sachet making. And then for the men we had axe throwing, we had log sawing, and we had log throwing. And we had also the stick pull. So that gave them an opportunity to kind of have a little fun with it.
I think one of the most special experiences was the Pony Express. Watching the actual pony come in, that was wonderful. Bringing the mail. I think they were excited to hear from, everybody loves to get mail. And especially after these few days without any communication from the quote-unquote outside world, it was neat to have mail. And as they parceled it out, you could see that the youth were excited also. And they would take their letters and they would find a quiet spot. And that was, I can close my eyes now and I can picture they're all spread around the fields and their tents, corners of the woods, reading their mails, heads down. Some a little tearful and some smiling, whatever it may be. And how precious it is to hear from those people who love you the most and pray for you the most at this time when you are experiencing probably some difficult things. So I thought that was a spirit throughout the whole campground when they were pondering and reading those letters.
Also, probably one of my most favorite times was when they had us all sit down quietly and read letters that we got from various people. And I really felt the spirit during that, and a lot of things I started to think about my life and just think about the gospel and stuff. So.
Letters from our parents really strengthened my testimony of eternal family, and also their role in the Savior's plan. And they offered words of encouragement during the hard times, and really put me more in the mood of being a pioneer, and all the loved ones and everything I left behind.
The Pony Express I think it was a really special experience. there were a few times that you could, definitely feel the spirit in the camp. And I think that was one of those times to just watch the youth on their own, read those letters. And I think one of the special things also about the whole trek was that each youth was given a journal. So they had the opportunity after they read their letters to write in their journal and to really ponder the trek in their own life and the spirit that they were feeling. And it was the only time, other than at night when people were sleeping, that the entire camp was silent. It was during that letter reading. And it was really, even though we as adults didn't receive any letters, we could feel the spirit that were in those letters that the youth were reading.
It's the last day. We just want to get it done.
Making breakfast in pouring down rain. It did not cook very fast and didn't look very appetizing when it was done. Oh, but it did smell good and it did taste good. Well, at that point, we'd made some friends. We'd made some family connections. We'd been through a lot together at that point. I think there was kind of kind of a sadness in the air that everyone was going to be going home soon. And I don't think everybody was. I think we could have gone a couple more days at that point. No one was ready to go home, and I think you could kind of sense that kind of sadness that we were all going to be leaving this. I think everybody had grown to love being there.
The last day started, weather-wise, the worst of all of them. It had started raining overnight, and it had rained through breakfast, and everybody still seemed pretty chipper, maybe because they all knew it was the last day, but they were still eating their pancakes in the rain and cooking in the rain, and it was just really fun. And I think everybody kind of, even though it was raining and it was a little bit miserable, everybody still felt, I think, a level of optimism knowing what they had done. So everyone got prepared and we took off, and there were some trials on that trail. There were some hills that were pretty difficult to push up, and there was some water.
Watch your neck.
Push from behind, push from behind. Push, push, push. Pull, Rayvon, pull. Push from behind.
Like huge hill that was like slippery mud on the top, and we're like going up this hill and like slipped over, and the whole cart like fell, and we had to try and get back up and get up the hill.
Trees. Oh my gosh.
A lot of the kids I'd never seen before, ever, and some of mine sort of seen around. One was actually in our ward, so it took a little bit of getting used to, but after 3 or 4 days, they were our family. They became our family. After working and sleeping and eating and doing all the things families do together, we really began to care about them.
That's good job. Okay, next company, come on up. Where's that apple? There it is. Push! Push! Tanner. Push! There you go. Good job. Pushing, 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 pushing. Awesome. Good job. Next girl, put your shoulders down now and push. What are you doing, Taylor?
Good job.
Woo! Good job. All right. There you go. Put your shoulders down and push. Put your shoulders down. Come on.
Well, it had a very nice feel to it. Like, after you could really feel the spirit going with you after all the miles. You got to get in touch with your ancestors because you could access how they felt on their journey.
Grab her head. Baby Beyonce. You like baby Beyonce.
I know that we got some rain that last morning, which I think was really good. I think it was a taste of what it perhaps might have been like to have some of the climate difficulties that you could have being out for months at a time. I couldn't imagine myself being out for a month at a time, but for me it was a wonderful cultural experience, and I don't really recall personally having any difficulties other than enjoying it and putting myself in the shoes of the people our forefathers who had done this to get religious freedom.
That the members that were there that lost family members were really touched. One of our responsibilities along with the activities was to assign infants, children, babies to each of the groups. And some of the groups took that very seriously. It was they were treated as a younger brother. Some of those infants did pass away at that time. And for the youth that had, that felt the spirit, it was a really moving experience.
I think the hardest part about that was, and we were instructed, if someone's name was called, they were just to walk off with no hugs, no goodbyes. And that was the hardest part of all. I think that's how it really was. You never know when it's gonna be their time. And so they were just, and they just had to go and join the dead, and that was the hardest part of all, I guess, not saying goodbye.
And one of the most enjoyable parts for me, though, was when we finally reached the Salt Lake Valley, or reached our destination, and we had all of our friends and family, and to see like the faces of my family and the extra strength that they got from seeing their friends and hearing the cheers, and as we ran across that last valley, I guess, felt overwhelmed with how incredible it felt to have completed the journey.
It was pretty neat. There were a lot of people there. Some people had signs, and people on top of people's, little kids on top of their parents' shoulders, and it was. It really felt like, almost a parade. They were all there on the side. And, there were a couple hundred people there. We couldn't wait to, see it. So the kids never pulled harder. They started running with the carts.
I was astonished at all the people that were there. I couldn't believe it. And the kids, I think every single handcart took off running across the field because they were so excited. But
what I think was so great about Trek was that we took these kids out of the world, and they were able to really experience feeling the spirit without any distraction. And I think that's, and then to put them back in the world, a lot of times it's hard for the youth to have the spirit be with them always when they got out of distraction. But they were able to recognize the spirit on Trek. And my hope for them is that they'll be able to take that into their life as they were going back into the world.
It was probably the best experience I've had in a number of years. If I relate it back to my youth, it's better than any experience I ever had in my youth. Between Temple Church youth conferences and all those, yeah, this ranks better than that.
Go spray.
it was amazing. It was neat to see the hugs between family members and moms and dads that had sent their kids on Trek. And it seemed like a whole bunch, the walls had come down at that point. Hugs between moms and paws and their kids, and people that had made friendships, you know, they were saying goodbye to their friends. It was a great time.
And so those first people obviously didn't have anybody there in the valley to greet them, as we had our family and friends to greet us at the end of the trek. But what joy, I can only imagine, would have swept over them, and accomplishment, and love for their Savior. And I think a little bit of that all happened in those few days, and I'm just so grateful and so blessed to just have a small part of that and to witness that.
A great spiritual experience. Like, I'd recommend anybody who could go to go. Like, it could be rough, but it's worth it.
And it strengthened my testimony a lot because I learned like how much the pioneers actually went through and how hard it was to walk all those miles, and how much faith they had in the prophet to travel west to a better place.
It's really important if you have an opportunity like this to do it, because, well, it's not something that you'll ever forget. And I mean, even though it's only been, a month and a half since we came back from Trek, I had an experience where I was just like, I was sitting, it was during church, and they were talking about hardships or whatever, and I was sitting there thinking about Trek and about how difficult it was for us to do it, and then thinking, well, we only had to deal with 4 days of this. People were on the real Trek for months. So I guess it puts your whole life into perspective, I guess.